I knew something was wrong the moment the sirens didn't sound. In the safe zone, the sirens were everything, our warning, our heartbeat, our last line between order and chaos. But that night, the air was thick with a silence so unnatural it felt alive. I remember stepping outside my cabin, the moon hanging low and distorted as if it was watching. The wind carried no growls, no distant screams, no shuffle of the dead. For the first time in months, there was nothing. And somehow that was the most terrifying part. People began to gather near the gates, whispering, glancing at the dark forest that surrounded us like a clenched fist. No one wanted to admit it, but we all felt the same thing, like the night was holding its breath. Then came the flicker. The lights along the perimeter blinked once, twice, and died. In that instant, the safe zone didn't just go dark. It went blind. I heard the first scream before anyone else reacted, a raw, panicked sound coming from the watchtower. A spotlight swung wildly across the trees, catching nothing but shadows that seemed to move on their own. When the gates opened, they didn't slam or crash. They simply eased apart, as if pushed by an invisible hand. And standing between them was Daniel Harper, the guard who'd gone missing 2 weeks earlier. His clothes were torn, his skin pale as frost. But it was his eyes, empty, unfocused, staring straight ahead. He wasn't one of them. He wasn't alive either. He looked like something caught between worlds. Before anyone could speak, he whispered a single sentence. "They're already inside." And that's when the safe zone, the place we called our last sanctuary, began to fall apart. If you've ever lived through a night when the world felt one breath away from collapsing, then you already know what I'm about to share. The safe zone wasn't perfect. No place was after the fall. But it was the closest thing we had to hope. Its walls kept the dead out, its routines kept us sane, and its quiet nights reminded us that survival was still possible. People laughed there. They cooked together, argued, celebrated tiny victories. Children even played near the central square, believing they were untouchable. For months it held. For months it felt like the end of the nightmare. And that's why the night it all fell apart hit us so deeply. Because safety had become a belief, not a reality. I remember walking through the settlement earlier that evening. Lanterns glowed gently, meals simmered in metal pots, and conversations drifted through the air like something from the old world. Light, warm, almost normal. And yet, beneath everything, there was this tension. This feeling you couldn't touch but couldn't ignore. Maybe the world had changed us more than we realized. Maybe deep down, we always knew the walls weren't enough. People pretended, but their eyes told the truth. Mine did too. Every survivor learns to trust their instincts, and mine had been whispering for days that something was coming. Tonight, you're going to hear exactly what happened when the safe zone was finally tested. When the silence turned from peaceful to predatory. When the gates opened on their own. When a familiar face returned with a message no one was prepared to hear. So before we go deeper, make sure you're ready. And if you're listening to this somewhere far away, tell me, what country and city are you watching from? Hit subscribe, drop a like, and share your location in the comments. The world may have fallen apart, but our stories keep us alive. The moment Daniel Harper stepped through the gate, everything inside me froze. Not because he looked injured or exhausted, but because he didn't look like someone who had been fighting to survive. He looked like someone who had already surrendered. His shoulders slumped, his breath shallow, his stare distant, hollow, as if whatever had happened to him had taken more than flesh. The guards shouted at him, demanding answers, but Daniel didn't react. He just stood there, swaying slightly, as if even gravity wasn't sure it still wanted him. I felt myself step forward without thinking, drawn by something I couldn't explain. Maybe curiosity, maybe fear, maybe both. When he finally moved, it wasn't towards us. It was towards the settlement square, slow and unsteady, leaving small footprints on the dirt path, as if each step cost him something. People gathered around him, whispering, asking where he had been, what he had seen, why he had disappeared. Daniel didn't speak. He kept glancing over his shoulder toward the dark tree line, as if expecting someone or something to follow him out of the woods. I watched his face closely. His lips trembled, not from cold, from terror. And then I realized he wasn't trembling because he was afraid of us. He was trembling because he feared what was still out there. The commander arrived moments later, pushing through the crowd. Commander Ellis was the type of man whose presence alone demanded silence, and silence he got. He stepped right in front of Daniel and asked the question everyone else had been too scared to say aloud. "What did you bring back with you?" Daniel's eyes widened, not in guilt, but in confusion, like he didn't fully understand the question. Or worse, like he didn't fully understand himself anymore. Ellis motioned for the medics, but Daniel suddenly grabbed the commander's wrist with surprising strength. His voice cracked, barely above a whisper, as he said, "It's not outside anymore." Those words rippled through the crowd, each person stiffening, each heartbeat caught mid-pulse. Ellis pulled back, trying to maintain control, but panic had already started to spread. He ordered the guards to scan the perimeter, but they hesitated, not because they feared the forest, because they feared Daniel. The medics carried him toward the infirmary, but as they did, Daniel twisted violently, eyes darting toward the main cabins. "You have to listen," he pleaded, his voice breaking. "They don't come like before. They don't growl. They don't run. They learn." Every word made the air feel colder, heavier. If he was telling the truth, then everything we thought we understood about the infected was wrong. Dead wrong. The idea of a silent predator, one that watched and waited instead of charging blindly. That was enough to send anyone's mind spiraling. I followed them to the infirmary, unable to stay behind. Curiosity always gets people killed in stories like these. But in a broken world, curiosity is sometimes the only thing that keeps you alive. Inside, the room was dim, lit by a single lantern. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, arms wrapped around himself, rocking slightly, not like someone comfort-seeking, but like someone trying to keep something inside. I approached slowly, and when he noticed me, he stopped rocking. His eyes locked onto mine with sudden clarity. "You heard them too, didn't you?" he asked. For a moment I couldn't respond, because he was right. I had heard things in the last few nights. Distant steps, faint rustling, shapes that didn't move like the dead usually did. I had dismissed it as paranoia, but Daniel wasn't hallucinating. He was confirming what I had tried to ignore. When I nodded slightly, something inside him seemed to break. He leaned closer, lowering his voice even further. "They watched me," he said. "They followed me for days. I think they wanted me to come back." The idea of the dead using someone as bait wasn't just terrifying. It was impossible. Or at least it had been. Now it felt like the rules of survival had just shifted under our feet. Before I could ask him anything else, a distant bang echoed from the west wall. Sharp, metallic, deliberate, not like claws, like knuckles. Someone, or something, was knocking. The knock wasn't loud, but it was intentional. A single, sharp sound that cut through the night like a blade. Everyone in the infirmary went still, frozen mid-breath. Even Daniel stopped shaking. For a second, no one dared to move, as if acknowledging the sound would make everything real. Then another knock came, slow, deliberate, almost polite. The kind of knock you'd expect at a front door, not at the reinforced west wall of a settlement built to withstand the dead. Ellis's voice erupted on the radio, ordering all units to the perimeter, but I could hear the tremor beneath his words. He wasn't just giving instructions. He was trying to convince himself we still had control. I stepped outside, pulled by the weight of the unknown. People were leaving their cabins, lanterns shaking in their hands. Panic had shape now, drifting between us like smoke. As I pushed through the crowd, heading toward the west wall, a realization hit me. The infected never approached quietly. They clawed, scraped, slammed. They were chaos incarnate. Whatever was knocking wasn't acting like one of them. Or maybe that was the point. Maybe this was exactly what Daniel had been trying to warn us about. By the time I reached the wall, the guards were already in position, weapons raised, flashlights aimed outward. The darkness beyond the metal barrier was impenetrable, a thick curtain that refused to let the light in. Ellis climbed the watch platform and signaled for silence. He pressed his ear against the cold metal and waited. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Then, 3 taps. Slow, even, rhythmic. Not undead, not animal, not human either. Something else entirely. Ellis swallowed hard before ordering 2 guards to raise a spotlight. The beam swept across the tree line, illuminating branches, dirt, empty spaces between shadows. But nothing moved. No figures, no glowing eyes, no shambling silhouettes. The forest was still, too still, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Then the light hit the wall. That's when we saw it. A handprint. Fresh, human-sized, pressed against the metal from the outside. But the fingers were wrong, too long, too narrow, and curved slightly inward like claws that hadn't finished forming. Gasps erupted behind me. Someone muttered a prayer, and another person began to sob quietly. Daniel's warning looped in my mind. They learn. If these creatures were changing, adapting, understanding how to stalk instead of charge, then everything we believed about survival was obsolete. Ellis ordered the gates sealed, double-locked, and guarded by 4 people at all times. But even as he said it, I knew it was a pointless command. Those prints weren't from something trying to get in. They were from something testing us. The commander shouted for Daniel. "Bring him here, now!" The medics led him through the crowd, and when Daniel saw the handprint, he recoiled as if struck. He shook his head violently. "No," he muttered. "It's faster than I thought." Ellis grabbed him by the shoulders and demanded an explanation, but Daniel could barely speak. "They don't break walls anymore," he whispered. "They search. They listen. They mimic." A cold chill ran through the settlement. The dead didn't mimic. They didn't imitate human behavior. That was our one advantage in this broken world. They were predictable. But now it felt like the rules were unwinding thread by thread. Ellis tried to maintain order, but the crowd was unraveling. People backed away from the wall as if it could reach out and grab them. Some whispered about fleeing into the woods. Others wanted to lock themselves inside the cabins. Panic was a living thing crawling over everyone's skin. Then, as if to confirm our worst fears, the knocks came again. But this time, from the east wall, then the south, then the north. 4 different directions, 4 different rhythms, as if the darkness itself was surrounding us, tapping gently, patiently, reminding us that the safe zone wasn't safe anymore. And for the first time since the outbreak, I realized something terrifying. We weren't being hunted. We were being studied. The taps eventually stopped, but the silence that followed was far worse. It wrapped around the safe zone like a shroud, suffocating, deliberate, as if whatever lurked outside had slipped into the spaces between our breaths. Ellis ordered everyone back to their cabins, but no one actually slept. Doors stayed open, lanterns stayed lit, and every pair of eyes was drawn to the walls as if expecting them to start bleeding. The fear wasn't loud. It was quiet, crawling, waiting. That was new. Fear had always come with screaming and running. Tonight it came with stillness. I went back to the infirmary to check on Daniel, but the room was empty. The bed was unmade, the lantern extinguished, and the windows slightly ajar. A cold draft seeped through the cracks. One of the medics confirmed he had told them he needed air and slipped out before anyone reacted. Daniel, who had just warned us the creatures were evolving, had walked out alone into the dark. Or maybe he hadn't walked out at all. Maybe something had come for him. My chest tightened at the thought, but I couldn't shake it. He wouldn't just leave, not after everything he said. I stepped outside and looked around. The night was moonless now, the clouds having swallowed the sky whole. Shadows moved in ways they shouldn't, stretching unnaturally toward the center of the settlement, as if being pulled by unseen strings. A lantern flickered near the main path, its flame trembling like a frightened heartbeat. As I followed the dim glow, I noticed footprints, fresh, uneven, dragging slightly. They belonged to Daniel, but beside them were other marks. Not footprints. More like impressions, shallow dips in the dirt, spaced too far apart to be human, as if something had been walking beside him, matching his pace. I followed the trail until it led me to the storage barn, one of the few places in the safe zone where the lock had rusted and never been properly replaced. The door hung slightly open, swaying with each breeze. Light spilled from inside, weak and sickly. My instinct screamed to turn back, to alert Ellis, to gather a group. But the part of me that had survived this far knew the truth. By the time help arrived, it might be too late. So I stepped inside. The barn smelled of damp wood and old grain. Lanterns hung from beams, casting long, trembling shadows that seemed to shift as I moved. Daniel stood in the center of the room, his back to me, shoulders hunched. His clothes were torn more severely now, as if something had clawed through them. "Daniel," I whispered. He didn't turn, didn't breathe, didn't twitch. He looked like a statue carved from fear. When I approached slowly and placed a hand on his shoulder, his body jerked violently, as if waking from a nightmare, but he still didn't turn around. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded wrong, hollow, as if echoing from somewhere deep inside him. "It followed me," he murmured, "but not the way you think." His hand lifted, pointing toward the far wall. When I turned, I saw scratches etched into the wood, not chaotic ones like the infected usually left. These were deliberate, straight, uniform, symmetrical, 4 long lines, then a pause, then 4 more, repeating, a pattern, a message. I stepped closer, tracing the markings with my eyes. It wasn't random, it was counting, keeping track, recording. My heart pounded as I realized what it meant. This wasn't the creature trying to get inside the safe zone. This was the creature documenting us, studying us, learning us. Daniel finally turned toward me, and I stepped back instinctively. His eyes, once hollow, were now wide, frantic, reflecting a terror so deep it looked like it might shatter him at any moment. "They don't want the walls," he whispered. "They want the routines. They want the patterns. They want to know how we live, so they'll know how to end us." Before I could respond, the lantern above us flickered violently. The shadows around us stretched across the walls like dark fingers reaching out, and somewhere outside, near the perimeter, a new sound broke the silence, soft, distant, unmistakably human. Laughter. But not the kind born of joy, the kind born of imitation. The laughter didn't come from one place. It rolled over the safe zone in waves, thin and distorted, like a recording played through broken speakers. People stepped out of their cabins, eyes wide, trying to locate it, but every time you turned your head, the sound seemed to shift. It wasn't natural. It wasn't chaotic. It was timed, controlled. Someone nearby whispered, "Maybe it's survivors." But even they didn't sound convinced. No survivor laughed like that. Not anymore. Not in this world. The laughter grew quieter, then stopped entirely, cut off mid-note, as if whoever or whatever was making it had heard our thoughts and decided we didn't deserve the illusion. Ellis rushed to the center square, barking orders, trying to impose structure on the unraveling night. Patrols were doubled, lookouts rotated, and everyone was told to move in groups of at least 3. "We stick to protocol," he said. "That's how we survive." But his voice lacked its usual weight. Protocol meant patterns, precisely what Daniel had warned us they were learning. We weren't just following routines, we were broadcasting them. Every change we made, every adjustment, every new order, it was all more data, more information for whatever waited beyond the fences. I found myself back near the barn, the scratches etched into my memory as clearly as the fear tightening my chest. 4 lines, pause, 4 lines, repeated. It wasn't random, it felt like a tally, days, people, shifts. I replayed the previous weeks in my mind, trying to match the numbers to patrols, to gate openings, to supply runs. Then it hit me. The count matched something horrifyingly simple. The nights we'd open the main gate after dark. Once to rescue a stranded family. Twice for late supply runs. Once for a search team. 4. The creature hadn't just been watching, it had been marking when we were at our weakest. I ran to Ellis with the realization, words spilling out faster than my breath could keep up. At first, he dismissed it as a coincidence, a survivor's brain trying to impose order on chaos. But as I laid out the timing, the disappearances, the knocks, Daniel's return, his expression shifted from skepticism to dread. "You're saying," he murmured, staring toward the gate, "that they've been waiting for us to repeat ourselves?" I nodded. "And we have," I replied. "Over and over." Patterns felt safe, predictable, stable. But tonight, patterns felt like a grave being dug one careful shovelful at a time. The radio crackled to life before Ellis could respond. A guard at the north tower sounded breathless, panicked. "Commander, we've got movement inside the perimeter." For a second, no one spoke. Inside. Not at the walls. Not beyond the trees. Inside. Ellis demanded details, but the response came out fractured. Figures, moving between cabins. Too fast. Not on the roster. The transmission cut out with a sharp burst of static. Then nothing. No screams. No shots. Just silence. The kind that pressed into your skull and made your thoughts feel too loud. We rushed toward the north side, boots pounding against gravel and dirt. Shadows shifted between buildings, slipping just out of the lantern light, always a step ahead of our gaze. I caught glimpses, 2 tall silhouettes that vanished behind corners, motion where there shouldn't be any, a flash of pale skin that disappeared before I could focus on it. Ellis ordered everyone to stop and listen. At first, all we heard was our own breathing. Then came the sound that froze us in place. Footsteps, dozens of them, light, measured, perfectly in sync. Not the uneven stomp of survivors, not the dragging shuffle of the dead. Something in between. From behind one of the cabins, a figure stepped into view. It was Mara, a young woman who had worked in the kitchens, always humming old songs under her breath. Except now, she wasn't humming, she wasn't smiling. She just stood there, head tilted, eyes fixed on us with an unsettling calm. "Mara," Ellis called. She didn't answer, didn't blink. Her clothes were clean, her skin unmarked. But there was something wrong in the way she held herself. Too still, too balanced, like she was waiting for a cue. Then, slowly, she lifted her hand. It wasn't the gesture that terrified me. It was what followed. As her fingers curled inward, 4 more figures stepped from the shadows in perfect unison, each emerging from a different angle between the cabins. Their faces were familiar, people we thought were sleeping, working on duty. But their movements were synchronized, their eyes eerily distant. They turned their heads at the same time, focused on us at the same moment, as if they were all following the same invisible command. One of the guards panicked and raised his rifle. Ellis shoved it down. "Don't shoot," he hissed. "We don't know what they are yet." As if in response to his words, the group of figures tilted their heads in the same direction, studying Ellis with clinical interest. Then Mara did something I will never forget. She smiled. But it was wrong. Too wide, too slow, as if she had seen a smile once and was now trying to copy it from memory. "Commander Ellis," she said, voice soft, almost melodic. "Protocol says we gather in the square during an emergency, doesn't it?" My skin crawled. She was repeating his words from earlier. Perfectly, word for word, intonation and all. She wasn't talking to us, she was replaying us. The illusion shattered when another radio call came in, this time from the west wall. "Commander, the gate. Someone just unlocked the first latch. We thought it was you." Ellis swore under his breath. While we were focused on the strange figures inside, something, or someone, had been obeying routine on the outside. "Secure the gate," he shouted, but deep down I knew it was too late. The creatures didn't need to break our walls. They just needed to understand how we used them. Mara and the others took a synchronized step forward, their movements too smooth to be human, too precise to be random. Their eyes flicked between us, calculating, measuring. Behind them, the lantern light wavered as if the air itself were holding its breath before a storm. For the first time since the outbreak began, I understood the terrible truth Daniel had been trying to tell us. The safe zone hadn't been infiltrated by monsters crashing through our defenses. It had been cracked open from the inside by something that had learned to wear our faces. The moment Mara and the others stepped toward us, the safe zone seemed to shrink. Buildings, fences, lanterns, everything that once felt protective now felt like a trap closing around us. Ellis raised his hand, signaling everyone to stay still, but the unease spreading through the group was stronger than obedience. The infected had always been predictable, creatures of instinct and noise. But these followed choreography. Every shift of their shoulders, every tilt of their heads, synced with perfect precision. They weren't moving like a pack. They were moving like a single mind stretched across multiple bodies. Ellis lowered his voice. "Back away slowly." His words were steady, but his jaw clenched with each syllable. No one moved at first. Then one of the guards took a step backward, boots crunching against gravel. The synchronized figures instantly mirrored the motion, stepping forward the exact same distance at the exact same speed. It was like watching a reflection come alive. A collective gasp rippled through us. They weren't approaching because they wanted to attack. They were approaching because we were retreating. We were teaching them how to corner us. I saw Daniel behind the barn, half hidden in the shadows, trembling violently. His eyes darted between the imposters and the gate, as if trying to find a path out that didn't exist. When his gaze met mine, he mouthed a single word: "Run." Not whispered, not spoken, just shaped with his lips. Run. But there was nowhere to run. At least, nowhere safe. The forest was too dark, the interior compromised, and the gates were being opened. A burst of static tore through the radio. "Commander, West Gate, second latch is unlocked. We can't keep it closed." Ellis's expression darkened. We all turned toward the wall, toward the sliver of moonlight visible through the gap, widening inch by inch. The metal hinges groaned softly, like the night itself was sighing. The imposters turned too, but not with urgency. Their movements were calm, measured, almost curious, as if they were watching the next step of a routine they'd memorized. Ellis made his decision. "To the square. Now." He shoved a guard toward the central area and motioned for the rest of us to follow. The imposters watched, heads tilting in unison as if processing the order. Then, slowly, deliberately, they began walking toward the square as well, matching our pace. Every step we took, they mirrored. Every turn, they copied. The square's fire pit smoldered from earlier that night, casting an orange glow that stretched our shadows into long, trembling shapes on the ground. The imposters stopped at the exact same moment we did, forming a mirrored half-circle around us. The silence that followed was unbearable. Not even the wind dared to move. Ellis scanned the group, then pointed at Mara. "What are you?" he demanded. She didn't blink, didn't breathe. Instead, she repeated his earlier command again, the same one she'd mimicked before. "We stick to protocol. That's how we survive." Her voice was perfect. Tone, pitch, pace, but empty, hollow, a recording without a soul behind it. And then she smiled, that same unnatural smile. The others did too, almost simultaneously, like a single gesture performed by multiple bodies. Something shifted in the darkness beyond the square. A soft rustling. A low exhale. Then a shape moved between two cabins, faster than anything human should move. It stopped just at the edge of the firelight, revealing only part of its form. Pale skin, elongated limbs, and eyes that reflected the flames in two bright, predatory points. The imposters all turned toward it and went completely still, as if awaiting instructions. The creature stepped forward, silent, graceful, intelligent. And when it raised its hand, the imposters copied the gesture perfectly. That was when the truth hit me like a punch to the ribs. They weren't evolving randomly. They weren't mutating on their own. They were being guided, taught, shaped. This creature wasn't just one of them. It was something new, something that could lead. Ellis lifted his rifle, hands trembling. "Don't," I whispered, grabbing his arm. If it wanted to attack, it already would have. It was true. It wasn't lunging. It wasn't roaring. It was observing, studying, deciding, as if we were the experiment, not the survivors. The creature tilted its head, eyes narrowing with a disturbing intelligence. Then it took one slow step backward. The imposters did the same, and then, without warning, it turned and vanished into the darkness, followed by every single one of the mirrored figures moving in perfect unison, slipping into the shadows like a single being dissolving into the night. The moment they were gone, the west gate groaned again, not opening, closing, as if whatever had entered was now leaving, but taking something with it. When dawn finally came, the safe zone didn't feel like home anymore. The walls still stood, the cabin still stood, the routines were still there. But something in the air had changed forever. It wasn't the fear of what might come back. It was the knowledge that it had already been inside, walking our paths, studying our habits, wearing our faces. Dawn didn't bring safety. It brought a painful truth. Last night wasn't an attack. It was a test, and we had passed or failed in ways we still didn't understand. Ellis tried to reassure the survivors, but his voice trembled with every promise he made. People searched for their missing neighbors, calling their names with hope that sounded more like denial. The west gate stayed closed, yet every creak of the metal made heads snap toward it. As for Daniel, he was gone. No signs of struggle, no footprints, just absence. Like he had been erased from the world he warned us about. And deep down, I knew. Whatever led those imposters into our home wasn't finished. It had only retreated to watch for the next pattern, the next mistake, the next opening. Because the safe zone didn't fall that night. It cracked. And cracks never stay small for long.